Okay, so today we're going to be looking at doing the front shocks on the Corsa. So first things first, let's get these wheels loosened off and the car up in the air. Okay, brilliant, so there we go. So the car's up in the air, nice and safe. We've got the chocks in, we've got the axle stands in, we've got the wheels just underneath there, and over the other side you can just about see, we've still got the trolley jack in place there as well. Okay, so next thing I'm going to do is just open the bonnet and get the scuttle tray off, take the wiper arms off so that we can access the top mount. Okay, brilliant. So bonnet up, scuttle tray now removed. So if you've not done it, what I'll try and do is put a link up here just to the removing the scuttle tray video. It's basically removing the wiper arms 1 and 2, taking off the rubber seal along here. If you've got them, a couple of clips, 1, 2, just removing them, removing your wiper hose, and then basically the whole thing comes away. And now what we can see is we've got lots of access to the top mount, both sides, that we need to access. Okay, so today in actual fact what we're going to be doing is not just the shocks, but we're going to do the springs, we're going to do the top mounts, we're going to do the bumper stops, and the dust covers. We're going to completely do everything, so everything from the hub all the way up. So what you could argue is that actually what I could do is just remove this one, get rid of it, and we can just build this one, which in actual fact I've actually done one already because I've put together the complete other side. So we can see here, obviously we've got the shock, we've got the new spring, the new top mount, got the dust cover, and the bump stop is installed just underneath it as well. But doing that wouldn't be much fun for you guys, so what we're going to do is obviously do everything, take it all apart. I've got the spring compressors ready and everything like that, so I've got a nice little treat as well. I know when we've done the Clio and we did the Giulietta, we used the spring compressors. On this one I've actually splashed out and got one of the hydraulic ones. So as much as we're going to be doing both sides together, one side and the driver's side, what I'm actually going to do is just do one side at a time, so that if anything I need to reference anything, should we say, then I can always come back to the side and just make sure I'm happy with everything as it is. So one of the things that I know is going to be a challenge on this one as well, and one of the reasons why we're changing it, is as much as you might argue, in actual fact it looks pretty new, the spring looks good and everything like that, why are we changing it? There's still a knock on this Corsa, and I've actually identified it to this top mount. With the car on the ground pushing it, we can actually see this top mount moving up and down. It's only kind of a millimetre, maybe 2 millimetres, something like that, but basically that's where I knock and that's where it's coming from. So what I'm suspicious of, as you can see, got a bit of rust on the top here. What I tried to do was tighten it back up the other week, just so that we could try and eliminate it that way and not have to shed out on new bits and pieces. But what's happened is the actual top of the shock has sheared off, so I'm guessing that whoever's fitted it has actually cross-threaded the main nut on the top here, which is why they couldn't get it any tighter, and it's not tightened up, and now it's actually got a knock on it. So we're going to have a real challenge in trying to get this off. But you know me, I like a fight and I like to try and come up with a solution. The other one on the other side, I'm not too sure about. You can see how it should look. Obviously it's got kind of the top of the shock there that is a I'm not sure what size it is, maybe some hex fixing, I'm not sure, but we should be able to get on there hopefully and loosen this one off and get this one off nicely. So for now what I'm going to do is just see if I can get this nut moving. Okay, so great success. We can see that our top mount fixing there is now loose. How did I do it? How did I actually get it off when it was cross-threaded? So what I actually managed to do was, as much as you didn't need to remove this bit of scuttle tray, I ended up doing that. Up in the wheel arch, I've got a pair of mole grips on here. So basically right on the kind of the main shaft spindle, holding onto that as tight as I could get them. That kind of where it went up against the body there, you can just see, held it nicely in place. Then, got the impact driver, managed to get that just between the gap of the bonnet and everything, and then on there, and then just give it a good whirl, and eventually it started moving quite nicely. So now I'm happy that that's loose, so let's go back down the bottom end and start loosening off and removing some bits and pieces here. Okay, so in here you can see already what I've done. It's just got some WD-40 on there. Just going over the fixings with a wire brush as well, just to clean off any kind of corrosion or any dirt and dust that's on there as well. Make sure you do them all so you kind of got your bottom fixings, but also this one up here. Apologies for the wind today as well. It's, what's the date today? 6th of April. It's the hottest day of the year so far, but with that heat, it's bringing a lot of stormy, windy weather. So hopefully I'm coming through on the mic all right today. Okay, so with those relatively clean and ready to go, what we can do is just remove some of these hoses. So we've got a brake sensor line that we can just disconnect there, that just pulls out. And then on our brake line, what you might have, like I said before, is a little silver clip just over that, which you can just pull away. And then once you've got that, you can just pull this rubber hose away, and that should just come off there nicely. Sometimes a little bit of WD on there can just help it slip out a little bit easier too. But there we go, that's away nicely. Right, okay, so the next thing I'm going to do is just release this drop link fixing. So depending on which ones you have, you may have different size ones. What I'm going to try and do as well is just get the impact driver on there straight away. It looks like about a 17 maybe on there. Yeah, so it feels like a 17. So what I'm going to try and do first is just see whether or not that wants to move with that. If not, okay, brilliant. So I love my impact gun. So straight away, there we go. And then if I come around this side, see, all we need to do is just push it out. There we go, move it to the side. What I'm going to do is put that nut just back on the front there so we don't lose it. Just start it off by hand because we never want to cross thread things. So that's now loose. Right, next up is the two main hub nuts. Okay, and I remember from when I did this before, there wasn't quite enough room to get the impact driver in this side because of the hoses and stuff like that. So I'm going to hold this fixing, which is an 18. You can see it there, just about 18 on there. Got our 18 in the gun as well. Okay, lovely. So they come away nice and easily, just as I thought they would. So we've now got this top one. There we go. And what I'm going to do is just put again the fixing on that, just to keep it safe, all in one place. And then this bottom one should come away nicely as well. There we go. Throw the nut on the floor, and again, just keep that together so it's nice and safe. So now our shock is loose. We just need to release the fixing back up top. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is just put one hand and hold the shock still, while up here, what I'm going to do is just release this now. Okay, so with that nut removed and obviously the shock out, what we can see is kind of the top cap that just goes on there, and that was the bit that was actually moving up and down just like that. So we're going to change that as well, because the top mounts I've got new ones of these two. Okay, great. So with that removed, what I've done now is just taking the opportunity to give that mounting point a really nice clean up. And then today's addition to the family is our hydraulic spring compressor. So what I'm going to do is not worry about, for today, taking this one apart, because like I say, we're going to be doing the shock, the spring, the top mount, the dust cover, and the bump stop inside there as well. So there's no point in me taking this apart and putting it all back together, because we're replacing every single bit. So for the purposes of the video, what we can do is, as I put it back together, you can just imagine that what I've done is put a spring compressor on it, compressed it all down, release the top fixing on the top mount, which is that inside one there we go. And then we'd have removed the top mount, taken the spring off, taken the dust cover off, taken the shock away, put the new shock in, and put it all back together. And it's that putting back together that we're going to do now. Okay, so let's have a look at all the parts while they're in pieces, shall we say. So we've got our new top mount. So we've got kind of the two sections to it. We've got the main kind of bearing, rubber bearing, or rubber piece, with then the bearing element. So this is obviously the bit that spins. So as you turn your wheel, your steering wheel, obviously that needs to move. And then you've got the new top mount. That one is the one for the other side as well. We've got our bump stop, which is going to go obviously over the top of the sounds like someone's having fun, which is obviously going to go over the top of the shock. Then we've got our spring. It's important to note as well, there's different ends to the spring, one narrower end and one wider end. One narrower end is narrower because it fits perfectly with the top mount. What you also need to remember is, when fitting your dust cover, that goes on, and basically this wider piece here creates the bushing between the spring and the top mount. So in that piece there, if we look at the one that come off the car, we can see the rubber comes up. This is the rubber here, and it's just in between the spring and the top mount. So it's nicely CC'd, so it's actually put together really well. It's probably not that old, to be fair. Like I say, the spring is in really good condition, but we can see there's lots of oil seepage there. So the shock is shot anyway, so we would need to replace that. So let's get some bits on here. So when I put the first one together just indoors the other day, what I found was afterwards I'd scratched the paint on the bottom of the shock. And how did that happen? Basically, where it clamps in to the mount here, this kind of comes in, and there ended up being still a bit of movement on it, and it just scratched it up. So obviously when it goes on the car, we want it to be nice and perfect. So handy little tip, what I've just done is just put a rag in there, still tightened it up, so this clamp kind of comes in and out, and then you just tighten it up with this fix in here. That holds it firmly in place so that we can now get the spring on. There is a factory shipping kind of clip in here, so we just need to remove that. It's just a case of pushing it down slightly, he says. There we go, that then comes away. As you can see, the shock then rises of its own power, and we can then remove that fixing nut, remove that packaging piece. There we go, I'll stick that back on there just for safekeeping for a second. And obviously what we want to do, as it's a new shock, we'll just pump that up and down a couple of times as well. Okay, and what I found the other day when I was putting the other one together was that depending on where you put the spring and kind of where you kind of get these bits onto the spring and compress it down, the spring will still bend this way, just like using conventional spring compressors. So it's a case of kind of getting them in the right place. A little bit of trial and error sometimes, but just getting it so that when the spring compresses down, it's nice and even and in the middle. Okay, so just dropping the spring on there, you can see kind of that lower point. If I put the phone down, there we go, you can see what I was talking about. So that's kind of this bump stop where the spring wants to come into, and then by the very nature of that, obviously as the spring comes round, it's just going to lean forward. So that's what I'm saying about when you clamp it in, you want to get it so that it's not off-centered, that it compresses down nicely like that. Let's stop messing around and get these hooked on and get it compressed. Okay, great, so there we go. So that's now nicely compressed. First innings, and we kind of got it pretty centered. Just hold the camera over there, it looks pretty good. And we can see that obviously the fixing is all the way up here. So what we should be able to do, hopefully, is get the top mount on there and get the top nut on. So let's have a go. Okay, so first things first, our bump stop is just going to go on. And then we're going to get our dust cover, slide that down. In actual fact, looks like we can get the dust cover on first. There we go, it's just going down nicely. Seating it nicely around the top. Bump stop, go on, get it the right way up. There we go. And then the two sections of the top mount, obviously the bearing point, the bearing part, and then the second part, so they just go together. You've got this rubber mounting that it kind of sits on, so it doesn't knock or creak or anything. And then that should sit in, he says, obviously remembering where our spring is, so that wants to align just inside that. There we go, pretty much. And then with that there, we can see that we've got all our thread, or not all of our thread, but a good amount of thread to get that top fixing on. And straight away, that's nice and secure. So all that messing around with spring compressors previously, where kind of you got it in that open point and it's like, are they going to slip? Are they going to come off? It just kind of mitigated all of that. This was about, well, I'm trying to think what it was now. Was it 85 or 100 quid or something like that? But if you're going to be doing more than a few springs at any point in time, then absolutely well worth it. Right, okay, you can see it looks a bit wonky. So as the spring is released, the spring is uncompressed, what we're going to do is just tighten this up first anyway, get that in position, and then as that spring is released, that's going to push up and kind of do away with these gaps, and we just keep our eye on it the whole way around. So this top mount, the fixing for this is, what's the torque setting? Okay, so the torque setting for this top mount is 58 Newton meters. What I will say, it's so worth doing your research beforehand, because the fixing on the top of this is kind of one of these shock mount fixings. And these are pretty difficult to come by, to be fair, for the right size. So I've got a dropped neck 17mm on the top here. I've got my torque wrench connected to the top of this, as you can see, just coming in behind me here. I've got that set to 58, so let's get this tightened up. Okay, brilliant. So now let's let off the pressure. Okay, brilliant. So with our nicely now together shock, next thing we need to do is obviously put it back in the hole, back up where it come from, and we'll get that top mount on. Okay, fantastic. So there we go. So that's now nicely back in where it should be. With the right way around, we've got our point for the drop link, which is just going to come back in around here. I'll show you actually this point here where that's going to mate onto there. Our knuckle is about to go back into here. So let's just watch out for your hoses as well at this point. Make sure they're on the right side, because the last thing you want is to be putting it all back together and then having to take it all apart again. So with a little bit of flex, watching our hoses, there we go. What we should be able to do is just offer that in. Now with our fixings that we had before, we kept nice and safe. What we should have done is removed that fixing earlier. We can just offer that back in through in the first one. We'll just get that one nut on there to hold it in place. There we go. Okay, and then the same with the drop link. We just remove that fixing, poke that back in through the hole. There we go, fixing straight back on, starting off by hand. Right, let's get all these three torqued up. Okay, and then when torquing suspension parts up, obviously what you want to try and do is do it under pressure as if the car was on the floor. So I've just got the jack, just lifting the hub up slightly. So the torque setting now for these is 105 Newton meters each one. So we've got our 18 on there, our 18 in the torque bit. So let's just get this done up. Great stuff. Okay, then our upper drop link fixing, that is 55 Newton meters. Great stuff. This is just to protect them from the elements a little bit, just to help stop them corroding. And then the last thing we need to do, obviously, is the actual top mount itself. Just torque that up. That's 60 Newton meters. That should be done with the car down on the floor, so we get lots of pressure on it. So because I've still got the other side to do, what I'm going to do is just use the jack just to lift it up even further. Create a lot of pressure on there, as though it was down on the ground. And then we can just torque this up to, what did I say, 60 Newton meters. Okay, brilliant. So with that nicely tightened up, what we should be able to do now is obviously let the car down, put the wheel back on, or put the wheel back on, then let the car down, and then we'll be all done. But I've got to do the other side, so I'm just going to whip over, do the other side as quickly as I can, and then we can take the car for a test drive. Okay, fantastic. So there we go, other side done. I think that side took about 10-15 minutes to do without making a video on it. So that one's all good and done and dusted. Just need to torque that one up when it's back down on the ground. So realistically now, let's get the wheels back on and get it on the ground. Okay, brilliant. So that one's torqued up, that one's torqued up. All I need to do now is just get all this scuttle tray stuff back in. Like I say, this front one you shouldn't really have needed to have taken off. It's just that I had the trouble with that top mount there. So I'm going to get this put back on now, get some tools back indoors, and then we can take it for a quick test drive. Okay, fantastic. There we go. One little test drive later, no more knocking, all done and dusted. So hopefully that's been useful. If you've enjoyed it, remember to give us a like down below. If you haven't done so already, remember to hit subscribe coming up here now. It's the easiest way to find your way back to the channel. All the videos on this, some videos on that, some videos on that, loads of videos on that, loads and loads and loads. But for now, I really appreciate you taking the time to watch. Thanks very much, and I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.